Hello, welcome to Mobile Web Thursdays. With me in the studio today is
Addy Osmani.
We normally have Paul Kinlan sort of driving these things, but he's not here today because unfortunately he died or went on holiday or something, I'm not quite sure. But for whatever reason, I get to sit in the driving seat, and it's a pre-record, so it's okay if I do an accidental swear because we can just edit that bit out. But we're gonna try not to.
Yeah.
This session is about mobile web debugging. So we're going to be looking how you can use the web inspector on your phone, well, looking at the web inspector on your desktop, but seeing what's happening on your mobile device. So we may as well sort of jump straight into it. I'm sort of learning the ropes of this whole thing still. So the tips I received from last time is not to just keep glancing at the camera as I'm doing things. People said that was quite disturbing.
It is. It generally is.
Is it? Yeah. Well,
a little bit creepy.
People say that to me in real life, that they find
I'm
when
not
I
surprised.
look at them quite disturbing. And also that I look a bit like a ghost on camera. We haven't managed to.
He looks like a ghost
that
in real life as well. Don't be too shocked. It's
yeah, I mean, this is a white piece of paper, and this is me. There's nothing I can do about that. People who've met me in real life were just like, yeah, you just look like you on camera. You were haunting the studio. Thank you very much for saying that, guys. That's brilliant. Okay, let's do some actual stuff with a mobile phone.
Sounds good.
So we can get the view of the mobile device up and running. We're working with a Nexus 7, so I'm just going to unlock that. So if you're going to do mobile debugging, the first thing you want to do is go into the settings menu and down to developer options. And then there you'll see this USB debugging. You want to make sure that's ticked because you won't be able to access it otherwise. And then you need to set a setting in Chrome as well. We're going to use the beta version of Chrome. I think it's pronounced beta, or maybe it's better. It's just Chrome Better.
Chrome Better.
Better than the other one.
Yes, that's it. So
there's a few new features in the Better version, so we're going to look at those. So you need to go into the settings menu here, and down to developer tools, and in there as well you want to enable USB web debugging. And from there we can just browse to a web page. So I'm going to call up The Guardian because we can use that as a use case. So if I wanted to debug this page, what I would do is I'm going to go onto my desktop machine. And this bit's a bit of a pain. I tend to just Google for Chrome debug, and the first link is what I want to look at. And actually, if I do Chrome Android debug, that's probably the right one. Thankfully, I have this in my bash history now, so I don't have to remember about it again. And about halfway down the page,
yeah. We've recently refreshed these docs, and the process of getting this set up is a lot more straightforward than it was before.
So what I tend to do is just copy and paste this line here into my terminal, and I'm going to do that there. And that sets everything up. And what it's actually doing is it's forwarding a port from the device onto my local machine, so I can start accessing things. And this port number here, 9222, that's what I can access just in my browser, just on Chrome on the desktop. And you can see there it's going to show me The Guardian. I click that. And now I've just got the developer tools, as you would expect to see them anywhere else. Actually, if I'm going to do some performance testing work here, I think I've made a mistake because I've just opened a standard tab on the browser. But Addy, you were saying it's better to use an incognito tab?
Yeah, so whenever you're doing any sort of performance profiling in Chrome, it's generally best to use a brand new incognito window instead of using sort of a standard window, because any apps or extensions you might have installed can actually interfere with the figures that you're getting back. So either run in incognito mode or start with a completely blank Chrome profile. And that'll just make sure that your figures are as accurate as possible.
Yep. So you get all the tools that you're familiar with on the desktop, but you're looking at a mobile device. So if I look in the timeline here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start recording. I'm going to refresh the page so we can capture what happens on a first load. As you can see, things are coming through. It will be just like it is on the desktop, but things will take longer because it's a lower powered device. I'm going to stop that there. Let's have a look at some of the stuff that The Guardian did as they loaded. So as you'd expect, I think this was stuff that was happening on the page before, but here we go. So this is where the response kicks in, receives some data, the page starts building itself. If we have a look, we'll see eventually there is some script evaluation. There's a big one. So I'm not picking on The Guardian because there's some kind of issue with it or anything, because it's actually one of the better performing websites. They've done a really, really good job of it. I'm just showing some of the things that maybe they could improve upon if they wanted. So if we have a look at this script here, what do we see? Okay, so there's a lot of sort of HTML parsing sort of happening on DOM load. So this bit of JavaScript here is taking up 300 milliseconds, and a lot of that is HTML parsing. This is little chunks of text being sent to, I haven't actually looked, it's something jQuery-like, because it's got a lot of the methods you would expect from jQuery, but I'd expect it's maybe Zepto.
Yeah, it's probably something custom or Zepto.
So if they delivered all of these as one lump to the parser, it would be much quicker than doing it in small parts, and then they could pull out the elements needed. But as I say, they don't really have a huge performance problem, but they could claw back a few hundred milliseconds by doing that. So one of the new things in the beta is we get some other features from the desktop, and one of those is paint rectangles. So if I click this cog in the bottom right-hand corner, I get this menu, and one of the things we're seeing here is show paint rectangles. So if we look at the device, what happens here is anything that's being repainted is going to get a red rectangle around it. And as you can see, it's only really the scroll bar, because that's being drawn every time I scroll the page. The reason we're not seeing any paints around here is because it's all already been painted. It gets painted when it's loaded, and we're just sort of panning up and down it as we're scrolling, because that keeps things really nice and fast. But if I scroll to the top here and click this top stories button, you can see that flash of red there, because it's had to draw that region of the screen. We can see that here as well. So if I get rid of those, I'm going to get rid of the paint rectangles here. Another one of the things we can see as well is the composited layer borders. And this will show us what's being sent as an extra layer to the GPU. On the show 2 weeks ago, we talked about what's going to cause a layer, what the benefits of it are, what maybe some of the downsides are. So if I press that here, we can see that a grid has appeared on the page. And this is because the page will be split into small sections and sent to textures on the GPU, and each one of these squares is another part of the texture. And as I zoom in, that grid will adjust itself, and we can see it's blurry, and then the grid updates, it becomes sharp again. So you can see that process happening. So anything that's on its own layer becomes part of the, it gets an orange rectangle around it. And as you can see, there's nothing really on the Guardian page that does that. If we scroll right down to the bottom here, there is one here. You can see this orange border around this section here. So let's take a look at why that's happening. If we bring the frames per second meter up as well, this gives you a clue to the GPU memory situation, which is really interesting. So we can see there 18 megabytes. So we're not using a lot on this page. But let's find out why that element's formed its own layer. So the easiest way to do that is in the Elements panel. I'm going to click this magnifying glass here. I click that, and then I can just tap somewhere on the device itself. So click there, and it's showing me that element. And if I go up to the UL, I can see the styles there. Nothing obvious in the nav. Nothing there. Here we go. So on this section's footer, there's this null transform. So that's not really changing the appearance of the page, but it is triggering a layer to be created here. Not quite sure why they've done that. It's maybe working around a bug in another browser. It's been known to sort of change how rendering happens and improve things in some browsers. But we can see, we're using, what are we using now, sort of 18, 19 megabytes. If I were to take that off and toggle the page, we've just freed up some GPU memory. We're down to 16 megabytes. So that's something they could do as well. But once again, I stress they don't really have a huge performance problem. I mean, even though they've got layers, they don't need it. It's not a big deal. So when we've got the frames per second monitor here, what I'm going to do is take the compositing off. There we go. So the frames per second only updates as I'm scrolling, because nothing's being drawn once I stop scrolling. That's so that the frames per second meter is going to stay still. But you can see as we're scrolling, we're achieving sort of near on 60 frames per second, which is the ideal. That's the refresh rate of the device. So in the last session, we were talking about some of the benefits of adding layers, like how it speeded up animation. But it's not always a good thing. So I'm going to try and break the page here. So I'm going to get rid of this frames per second monitor, and I'm going to give everything on the page its own layer. And to do that, the simplest way, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and spell the word document. I'm going to create a style element. And in the text content for that, I'm going to do for every element and WebKit transform. Do watch if I spell anything wrong, because I'm dreadful at this.
This is genuinely the first piece of coding that Jake's done all year.
Yeah.
So don't worry if it looks a little bit crap.
Started Google and that's it, not allowed to code anymore. And I'm going to do translate Z 0. And this time I'm going to put some semicolons in just to mix it up a bit. And so we're still, yes, if I stop highlighting over an element, we should still have some really smooth scrolling going on here. Yeah, that's still smooth. Because although I've created that style element, it's not in the document yet. So I'm going to do document.append child. Am I spelling that right? CHILD. Yep. And so this is going to add that script to the page and make everything its own layer. So I'm just going to keep scrolling the page, and you can see it's smooth. And now I'm going to add that element to the page, and that will take effect in a second. Oh, actually, yeah, you can't do document.append child. That's a silly thing to do. It's document.head.append child. This is why I don't do live shows. Right, so buttery smooth scrolling, and then that goes into the document, and there we go. We can see the scrolling the performance has just gone completely down the toilet. It's awful.
And the reason for that is that the link between the CPU and GPU doesn't really have a lot of bandwidth, right? And so when you introduce excessive textures there, it's just gonna look crap.
Yeah, exactly that. If we bring the frames per second meter, it shows us exactly what's going on here. I mean, it tells us the frame rate has gone down to 25 or less. But the real clue here is the GPU memory. We're hitting the top of the GPU memory. So as we scroll down the page, things are going out of GPU memory, other things are coming in. We're losing all of the performance that we would get from the hardware. It's just, yeah, it's a terrible thing to do. So, and we can see now if we put the composited layer borders on, you can see now everything has that orange border to show that it's in a layer. But yeah, all we would need to do to get our performance back is in the dev tools, I'm just going to change that to remove child. So scrolling bad, and that will take effect. And there'll be a little bit of time before it kind of realizes, oh yeah, I can actually sort of flush the GPU memory, and everything should come back to normal. There we go. So everything is smooth again. Yeah, so be careful with your layers. Make sure you're not creating too many, but they can be really good for certain bits of animation performance. But make sure you're testing on the device. Make sure you're looking at the GPU memory. Don't overuse it, because you will lose a lot of performance in other places.
Yeah, I mean, ideally make sure that you have a measurably high repaint cost on something before you start exploring using these kinds of hacks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Addy, you're going to, what are you going to talk about? You've
so
brought some toys.
I've got some toys. So there have recently been some really nice new tools that have come out for sort of mobile debugging, and I'm going to be showing you something called MeTool, or MIHTool, that basically gives you an entire WebKit inspector on an iPad or iPhone. So we're going to switch around a little bit. We're going to do a
We're going to do a swap.
We're going to do a swap.
Well, this is the thing. This studio only has one camera next to me with the mobile device on, and I've got this machine all networked up. This is something we couldn't do live because we're actually going to have to swap seats. But we're going to edit this in. It's going to look really smooth.
It's going to look amazing.
It is. It's going to. Maybe we should have some kind of animation where it just sort of morphs from maybe each of our faces. If we look at the camera, and could we just have something that would morph our faces? I don't think we've got time to do that.
We might.
Let's just kind of have a just awkward fumble. Hello and welcome back to Mobile Web Thursdays. I'm Addy Osmani, and with me in the studio is
Jake Archibald.
So you're going to be showing some toys you've brought in.
Yes. So I brought in an iPad today, and I'm going to be showing you a brand new tool called MeTool that helps you debug apps and sites directly on your iOS devices. And one of the cool things about this is that you get both an inspector on the device, but you can also get things like timeline for inspecting what your performance is like, what your scripting is like. You get access to sort of complete cache control. So if you want to make sure that your pages aren't being properly cached, and you just see how your page is performing there, you can do that on the device too. So I'm going to switch over to the iPad right now. And I currently have the site called, so this is a jQuery plugin site called Isotope. And basically, you've probably seen this before. It's by Dave DeSandre. And it just sort of organizes things into this really nice layout that's pretty flexible. But so Jake, you were talking about sort of composited layer borders earlier, right? I'm going to go and I'm going to, first of all, enable the web inspector on on here. And the first thing you're going to notice happen is that I now have sort of DevTools slash a web inspector on here. I can go and I can inspect elements. I have a resources panel. I've got network. I've got timeline. And I can basically use these in the same way that I do on sort of desktop DevTools.
So is that a native app running on the
This is
the
a
iPad?
native app that's running, and it's available for sort of iPhone and iPad. Now, something I'm interested in is whether this page is actually using composited layer borders. Whether this will work with composite layer borders on to see if any of the elements on this page are being promoted. And I can actually go into the menu for this app and trigger WebKit debug borders on. I'm going to need to restart the app really quickly, so I'm just going to do that. Back into MeTool. And now I know it's very, very subtle. You probably can't see it actually, but we do have the exact same tiles on this page that Jake was showing you earlier. What you'll also have are basically these little outlines. So let me zoom in on an element. And what you'll see around many of these elements on the page is that they have the same sort of highlight around them. It should be yellow, but in this case it's a little bit more green. But basically that means that all of these elements that have that border around them are being promoted to a composite layer.
Does that have the thing where each tile is given the number of times it's been redrawn?
Yeah,
as a
actually,
little number?
yes, actually. So this is a feature that's actually in the WebKit Nightlies at the moment, if I'm correct. And you get this right with MeTool, right? So you can get this on your mobile device. So I'm going to enable WebKit Repaint Counter. I'm going to restart the app once again very quickly. And now what you can see, you probably saw it as a flash, but what you can see, and we can zoom in on a specific block of the page, but around every single element, we now have this little counter in the corner that basically tells you the repaint counts for that layer. And if I scroll up and down, these numbers will go up in some cases depending on what's going on. Whoop, just closed out of the app accidentally. But these numbers have basically gone up in some cases because of repainting.
This is something. I'm no fan of Safari's web inspector. I don't understand how the icons work. It confuses me. But check out the WebKit Nightlies and check out this tool because they've done some really excellent work around it. And there's a lot of stuff that we're looking at with web inspector going, well, we could have some of those ideas.
There's some really interesting ideas in there, and you also get access to things like full user agent settings. So I can go and I can set this to sort of Firefox or Chrome or IE or whatever I want, basically, without having to go back and forth between my desktop and my device. So it means that you get to debug stuff more so on an actual device rather than having to sort of emulate it somewhere else, which is kind of neat. But MeTools has also got some additional features you might find useful. So if you go to View Source in here, you'll actually get a complete editor. I probably want to turn off those sort of composited layer borders very quickly. I'm just going to restart that. Still have the repaint counts on, doesn't matter. But if I go to View Source, this complete view here, you might think that it's just read-only, but I can actually go and make changes to this page, which will then be previewed in real time once I go back. So I can make changes to this any way that I want, the same way that you'd probably make changes to scripts or styles inside the DevTools. And the author of MeTool is a guy named Unbug, so twitter.com/unbug. And he's currently putting a lot of work into improving this editor so that you can basically go wherever you want, make live changes to your site or your app, and just preview what it's like and debug directly on the device, which I think is kind of neat.
Yeah, so I presume that's using, because it's a native app, it's using a web view to show you the page.
Yes, this is using a web view.
Does that mean it's going to be, because Safari, they have some kinds of JavaScript acceleration that are only available to the native browser and not web views. Is that's the case here?
So there are some limitations to it. When it comes to performance profiling, that is going to be one thing that you have to keep in mind. This is still using WebView. It's not going to be completely accurate when it comes to sort of using timeline for your performance profiling. But for things like getting insights into your composite layer borders, getting insights into those repaints, it's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
Another useful thing you can do with this is you can actually remote into this tool and basically drive it from your desktop if you want to. I don't have a full setup for this on my screen at the moment, but if we switch back to my screen, I do have a screenshot of this working earlier. But basically, I can control this the exact same way that I would, that Jake was basically doing earlier with sort of remote debugging to control the device. And you can actually send this a bunch of commands. You can send it URLs that you want it to sort of load up. You can inject scripts into there. You can do a bunch of stuff. So it's definitely worth checking out. We'll link you up to MeTool in the show notes. But the next thing I'm going to be talking about is some mobile emulation tools that we have inside the DevTools. Now, for anybody that has done any amount of sort of mobile debugging and mobile development before, one pain point is actually having to have these kinds of devices around to properly debug on, and not everybody has got those. I mean, we've got like a Nexus around here, we've got Nexus for phones, we've got tons of devices. Most people don't actually have like their own private lab for this stuff. So sometimes it can be useful to have mobile emulation tools available to you, so you can just get this stuff done inside your browser. And we've put a lot of work into doing this in Chrome via the DevTools lately. The first thing I'm going to show you is, so let's say that you're working on an app or a site, and you just want to be able to preview what your breakpoints look like. So let's say I'm using media queries, and I want to see what does my site look like at different viewport sizes. Go into Dr. Write mode. So I'm currently in Dr. Write mode. Let's just kill the DevTools very quickly. I'm going to go back into my DevTools. This is probably what you start out with. Just hold and toggle in the very corner, and you can then switch to Dr. Write mode. And you can then use the splitter. So I'm going to be moving my splitter more to the left. And what you can see as I do that is that the layout, so this is the Boston Globe, the layout is actually changing every single time I hit a different breakpoint. And that means that I can just preview what this site looks like at different breakpoints. Normally what some people have been doing is actually resizing Chrome. You don't have to do that. You can just use this, and it'll do the exact same thing.
Yeah, because Chrome has a minimum width to it as well.
Yeah, it does as well.
But you can, it's not a problem
with
here.
This, there's not that issue. I can go as far back as I want. Like I highly doubt, well, at least now until people get watches that are running WebKit on them, you'll be doing that. But this is pretty useful for those kind of workflows where you do want to just check out and make sure your breakpoints are looking okay. Now, speaking of mobile emulation, I'm going to go back into full view. Now, we've put a lot of effort into improving the mobile emulation tools inside Chrome. And if we go back into sort of the settings cog that Jake was showing you earlier, you're probably going to land in General by default. Switch on over to the Overrides tab, and you'll get access to a whole range of different tools for emulating things. At the very top, what you can see is User Agent. You then have Device Metrics, Geolocation, Device Orientation, Touch Events, and CSS Media. So I'm going to show you some of these in action. So we're on the Boston Globe. I'm going to go and I'm going to emulate my User Agent to something like, let's say, iPhone. Now what you'll notice is that automatically that's actually triggered my device metrics to be changed. And this is really useful for a workflow that that lets you just preview what your device viewport might look like on those devices. So what you'll see, so I can actually, let me close out of there and just show you this view a little bit more. But basically, this is around the same size as an iPad, as an iPhone might look like from a metrics point of view. But I can easily go and change the orientation that I'm in. So I can go from sort of this to this very easily. I can go and I can set custom settings for my screen resolution if I want. I'm also able to change my settings for font scale. So if a device has got a particular font scale that you want to emulate, you can also just easily go in and change that.
So I guess what you would want to do there with working with the iPhone, I mean, the numbers that are in there are the number of device pixels,
yes,
not the number of CSS pixels.
Exactly.
So
yes,
you probably want to half those at the moment.
Probably, yeah.
Something we're working on at the moment is emulating device pixel ratio correctly in the browser, but that hasn't landed yet.
That hasn't landed yet. It's hopefully going to in the next few months.
Oh, brilliant.
But it's been a feature we've getting a lot of requests for. As mentioned, there are a ton of different options inside here at the moment. You've got sort of BlackBerry, Android 2.3 with the Nexus S, you've got Firefox, you've got IE9. And this just means that rather than having to go and open up a complete device or throw open an emulator, you can just do this stuff inside of DevTools, which can save you some time. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is geolocation. Why don't we look at that? So Remy Sharp put together this nice little geolocation demo that basically says, okay, well, if your device supports providing you some sort of location, when I load up this page, it's basically going to try finding me, and it's going to display a Google map that shows my location.
It's done pretty well.
Yeah, it's done pretty well. So we're currently on we're on Bonhill Street at Campus London. And it seems to have roughly found out where we are correctly. There are, however, going to be times when you're working on an international application that's going to need to perhaps be able to show some custom content depending on where your user is based. So how do you debug that? You can't take your device and fly over to Spain just to preview what that looks like. It just wouldn't make sense. So we've got this nifty little feature that actually allows you to override your geolocation settings. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and I'm going to just enable geolocation. and I've actually preset my latitude and longitude to something. So I'm now going to just refresh this page. And it's placed me somewhere else. So this is a custom location. And why don't we just zoom into this? So zoom, zoom, zoom. What's that? We're now at the Batman dental practice.
It's not the dentist you need. It's the dentist you deserve. This is in West London. It's brilliant. I
can't believe there's a place that has a Batman dental practice.
I just put Batman into Google Maps. It's surprising how many places are named after our Caped Crusader. If you ever need to find out the lat long of a particular place, easiest way to do that is to go into Google Maps and actually, can we get my screen up? Is that possible for a moment? And all you need to do is if you right-click somewhere and you click what's here, and then the numbers that are up here, that will be the lat long of the place you right-clicked. So that's if you're trying to test a particular place in the world, that's the quickest way to get the lat long of that place.
Excellent. Now, sometimes you're also going to want to be able to preview what it's like if you don't have geolocation available at all. So when I don't have my position available, I can actually just go and enable another option. So emulate position unavailable. And if I go and I refresh this page again, what you can see is that find your location has failed. And that's just another nice little debug thing that can help you with trying to figure out, do I display a specific message to my users saying, hey, we couldn't find your position? Do we fall back on something else? But that's just another little helper that you can use for geolocation apps. The next thing I'm going to talk about is device orientation. So device orientation is basically what we're talking about when I'm moving my device in different directions, tilting, forward, backwards, all of that fun stuff, as our model Jake is showing off. But there's a nice little helper for this in the DevTools as well. So I'm going to go to a new tab with a different demo on it. So this is a HTML5 Rocks demo that has got sort of device orientation stuff set up. And we're just going to see what happens when I change my device orientation. So back into overrides, override device orientation. Now I should probably explain right before we start playing around with these values. So here you see alpha, beta, and gamma. So alpha corresponds to the direction in which your device is facing. Beta is the front to back tilt. And gamma corresponds to the left to right tilt. Now, what that means is if I go to beta and I perhaps change the value to something like 60, and go to gamma, what you'll see is that it's instantly changed. That basically corresponds to me doing this on my device. Now, I can also go to my gamma and I can change that. So let's try changing that to 60 as well. And what that's done is it's altered the device tilt. So basically that. And just being able to change these values directly inside DevTools is so much easier than having to open up your app directly on the device and figure out, oh, okay, am I in the right direction? Is this working? But yeah, it's a really useful workflow helper.
I seem to remember there's some suggestion that we might do something a little bit better with that interface, right? Maybe something in 3D.
Yeah. So we've been playing around. So none of this is sort of final, but we've been playing around with some different mock-ups for how we could improve this. Because right off the top of my head, I could not remember the alpha, beta, and gamma. So it's just not going to happen. And so we've been thinking about, what if we had some sort of visual way, like a 3D box or something, directly inside the tools, so that when you change these values, it's possible for you to easily see, okay, well, this is the direction in which my device is now. This is how it corresponds to what my app would be doing. So that's coming on. We'll see if we end up landing anything like that. But it's just another useful mock-up that we've been kicking around. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about are touch events. So got a little demo for that as well. Now, touch events are something particularly useful to emulate because, again, you don't necessarily want to be pulling out a device every single time you want to, just test that things are working. And if you've got your app and it's supposed to be working fine on desktop, supposed to be working fine on mobile, something you can actually do is just go back into overrides and emulate touch events. Now, before I go and emulate this, I'm going to show you a quick demo. So this is a paint demo by Paul Irish and a few other folks. And the general idea is, so I go into this canvas area and I start moving my cursor around. And I should be able to draw inside here. Now, unfortunately, this demo only works with touch events. It's sort of optimized for touch. And I can't do anything in here unless I'm on an iPad or a Nexus device. So I go and I emulate my touch events, and what that basically means is that I can just use my cursor to emulate things like on touch start, on touch end, and so on. And I can actually, hopefully, draw in here now. So there we go, it's working. This is just going to look so bad. It's like the worst thing ever. but it works, right? It works. What's also helpful is if I now go back to my sources panel, and I go to event and listener breakpoints in the sidebar. So let me expand that a little bit. I scroll down. You'll see one expandable called touch, right? And in here you'll see touch start, touch move, touch end, and touch cancel. Now let's say that I want to set breakpoints on touch start and touch move. What happens now is if I try drawing inside here, it's going to pause inside the debugger because it's detected that I'm either running one of those events, and it's just detected that we want to stop there. And this is useful because it means that, again, rather than having to be on an actual device, I can just do this stuff inside of DevTools and have a complete debugging workflow using the tools that I'm used to using, which is kind of nice.
If we can switch to my screen for a moment, this a project by one of our colleagues, Boris. If you're interested in hacking around with something, this is a really good project to look at, MIHTool. So this is using a variety of tools, and what it'll let you do is it'll convert your touchpad on your Mac, if you have one, and it will send those multi-touch events into the browser. So you can use the touchpad as the same way you would a phone surface, and it puts those events to the browser. And there's a little bit of work to get it set up, but if you've got some spare time to have a hack around, it's a fun thing to do. And if anyone wants to do some pull requests, you can teach Boris how to write some HTML. Then that would be very beneficial to Boris and Google, I feel.
Excellent. So while it's not necessarily related to mobile, the last thing that I'm going to be showing you, well, second last thing I'm going to be showing you, is CSS print style emulation. So I'm going to go back inside the DevTools and overrides. The very last option is emulate CSS media. And this is useful for, I guess not a lot of people are going to be using it, but it's useful for, if you want to preview what, say, your print style sheet looks like without having to go and hack around the DOM and hack around your different style sheets. So I go here and I emulate CSS media. I'm on Smashing Magazine. And what you can now see is that it's completely switched the styles in this page over to something that can actually look decent.
I didn't realize they had print styles. That's really nice.
Yeah. It's one of the few sites I was able to find that actually has them. But this is really useful. Smashing is one of those sites where you might want to actually print out articles if you don't necessarily have a device you're carrying around the place. But yeah, it's another little helper that can just avoid you having to do too much extra stuff just to preview your print styles.
Does our emulation there, does that cover the way when things print, they don't tend to print backgrounds? Is that covered there, or is it just switching the style sheet?
I think this is just switching the style sheet. So this also does, again, fewer sites actually use these. So you can preview what a site using Braille might do for that specific style sheet, or screen or speech or TV and so on. But yeah, it's kind of useful. The last thing I'm going to show you is a little demo using BrowserStack. So BrowserStack, I'll just quickly put it up on screen. BrowserStack is this really awesome site that lets you basically test things in the cloud. So if, for example, you're an app developer that wants to see how their site or app looks like in ice cream sandwich on a specific sort of mobile phone or iOS 5 on a specific Apple device, and you don't have the money or the funds or the time to go plugging in these different devices, and you don't necessarily want to be using emulators, you can just use BrowserStack for this. They've got a ton of different devices hooked up, a ton of different emulators. They're just running in the cloud, and you can just spin up different instances of those whenever you want. So what I've actually done for my dot files is I've just wired them up so I can actually just easily execute any site, whether it's local or external, via a specific combination. So in this case, what you can see is it says Android Nexus, and I want to go see what the Boston Globe looks like on latest Android version on a Nexus device, and that's basically going to go and spin up BrowserStack. Should hopefully take just a moment. And this is the part where it just fails colossally.
Of course.
It's just
there we go.
It's working. Maybe it's opening something.
Cameras do have a habit of breaking any demos.
They do.
But I find this tool really useful. I was a couple of weeks ago. I was working from home because it had snowed, and if you can't work from home when it's snowing outside,
snow is Jake's general excuse for not being at work.
Yes.
It's just.
But I was writing an article about script loading, and we had this suspicion that maybe there was a time when one spec came in, one spec was changed, and we were worried that maybe there was a kind of crossover period that might be on some Android devices. And I was at home. I only have one Android device. Well, I've got two, but they're both running ICS. So just be able to spin this up and just to be able to just go through loads of devices, loads of different Android versions and iOS versions to see what was going on. It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, the performance isn't. You can't test performance-sensitive things.
Performance is a tricky thing to test. And we've been speaking to BrowserStack about this, and apparently one thing that's on their radar is being able to remotely use your DevTools to inspect pages. So I might be using my local DevTools, call out to a BrowserStack instance, and actually be able to see performance profiling in real time on an actual device.
So although you wouldn't be able to see what was happening with the performance, like in terms of the phone updating, you would get the accurate information from the timeline.
Yeah, exactly. Actual data, which is actually really, really fascinating. BrowserStack also have like a ton of developer tools that you can use on many of these devices. I'm not sure how well those sort of interact with some of the emulators, but they're constantly doing a lot of work in the mobile space to try improving sort of testing in the cloud. And I think it's just, again, for those people that don't necessarily have a local device lab, it's genuinely useful for your testing workflow.
That's really neat. Excellent. Thank you for joining us in this Mobile Web Thursday extravaganza. Do you think we can call it extravaganza?
I think this has been a colossal failure, if anything. But we can call it.
Well, should we say? Let's reach a compromise, and we'll call it a colossal extravaganza.
There we go.
That's it. Excellent. And so next Thursday there'll be someone else sitting here talking about something else. I haven't actually looked it up, but you should tune in for that because I'm sure it will be absolutely amazing. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.